Hello everyone, and welcome to this Cloud Academy webinar. Today we're going to be talking about AWS certifications, and today we have a special guest, Stephen Wilding, who's actually achieved all 5 certifications. So before we start, I just want to give an introduction. My name is Stuart Scott, and I'm one of the trainers here at Cloud Academy, and I'm responsible for creating content and courses surrounding cloud computing. I specialise in AWS, and so it's a great privilege for me to introduce our special guest today, Stephen Wilding. Stephen has incredibly achieved all 5 AWS certifications. He's the founder of Hydrus, and he works as an AWS solutions architect, where he designs, builds, and secures cloud-based systems. He's also the co-organiser of the AWS User Group in Cambridge, UK. So, Stephen, hello and welcome to this webinar. How are you doing today?
Yeah, good, sure. Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
No, it's a pleasure to have you. Thank you. Before I kind of get into the questions on how you achieved this, Stephen, I just want to fire up a quick poll just to find out from our listeners how many AWS certifications you guys have out there. So whether you have all 5 or just 1, 2, 3, or 4, it'd be great to get your feedback on that. So Stephen, just to start, what's your IT background before you started getting into AWS and cloud computing? Kind of where did it all start from?
Yeah, good question. So I started in IT in year 2000. So straight out of university. Actually, I had a chemistry degree in my background.
Okay.
And then decided for a career change at that time. The IT boom was kicking off. IT jobs were abundant, paying well, and I used to tinker about with computer systems in the background, but not really as a like a major course of study. So in that time in my life, I decided I want to change from science, so I went into IT, and I started my life as a Unix sysadmin. Spent around about 4 or 5 years as a dedicated sysadmin. And then moved into security administration.
Okay.
So that was about 2004/5. Spent 5-6 years doing security administration and security architecture. So there's a logical step to go into architecture. So I started doing admin, then started designing systems, securing them, and doing the security consultancy thing. And then around 2012, got into AWS really. It started as a sideline. Just I thought, this stuff's really cool, really interesting, and yeah, kind of picked it up from there really.
So what was your trigger for deciding upon AWS over other cloud vendors? I mean, how did you decide to go down the AWS track?
So I think at the time, AWS was, well, and still is a massive leader. I mean, everything's so much more advanced in AWS that you can do anywhere else from my perspective. So when I was tinkering around with cloud systems, AWS was just head and shoulders above, and it will continue to be really. So when I got into AWS, I liked the way it worked. I liked the format. I liked the interface and how quickly they were releasing things. So I saw it as a future. So that's where I kind of started my consultancy.
So it kind of ticked all your boxes on a technical level.
Absolutely, and it was interesting. With the cloud, as probably many of you know, you can do things so quickly compared to what you can do in traditional IT environments. It was like a breath of fresh air, really. So
at what point from that track, when you started to learn about it, did you decide to become certified? What was your thought process there? Was it just to clarify what you knew, to kind of show people that, hey, I'm certified, I know what I'm talking about, or was it more of a personal goal of yours?
Yeah, so good question. So I think several-fold. I don't think there's a single answer. So you've got to remember, back when I started, there was no certifications. So certifications are probably only 3 years old, maybe a bit longer. So the driver was several-fold. For me personally, it was a challenge. I think there's always a good challenge for someone who's technical to test their knowledge. So doing the certifications, at least the associate ones, was a good way to test that knowledge. Another one was from the point of view of the consultancy. So my consultancy Hydrus, we're an AWS partner,
Okay,
and all partners have to have a certain number of certifications within the company to keep in good standing. So
I see.
so whether you've got a personal challenge or not, that's actually a driver for most partners to learn. And I think that's a good thing because AWS want their partners to show a level of competency, and certification is one way to prove that competency. So that was another driver, of course. We have to have a certain number of certifications, and as you become a more advanced and premier partner, that number goes up. So it's in your interest to keep those up.
So is that how you kind of went from your first AWS cert through to the fifth? Was that a part of the driver, or did you need
No,
certification for
no.
partnership?
I think the driver to get all five was more personal or more career rather than business. I mean, we're a standard partner, and I think you only need two. It would help us move to advanced. We could get to advanced now,
Brilliant.
but of course
So you
that
went
wasn't
way
the
above
driver.
board.
Yeah, I mean the driver was merely for two things: challenge, to test my knowledge, and also because I think studying for these certifications, especially if you find you get into the professional ones, you need to come out of your comfort realm and maybe study areas that you wouldn't normally touch on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, because it kind of covers a wide spectrum of kind of technical aspects and services from your kind of DevOps through to your databases, through to your application, and an architect of the whole network as well. So there's a wide range of areas there that a lot of people might not have expertise in all. So I guess from that perspective, it's quite difficult to study for.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think obviously the professional ones are a step up because you need to go a lot deeper into what you know. The solutions architect the associate ones, you could, to a certain extent, I think, get through those exams with book study and probably using training courses. But the professional ones, you do need to have a working knowledge, I think.
Hmm.
And quite a wide working knowledge. So I think whatever job you do have to come out of your comfort zone if you're going to get both pros, because they're quite different in terms of what they focus on.
So how long did it take you to actually get all five from the first one? I presume you started on the associates and then to the last professional.
Yeah, so I mean, I didn't set my so the way I did it originally is I got two because that was what I needed to get or our company needed to get to maintain good standing. So I did two that I needed to do at the time.
Okay.
That was not this year, last year. And I always put it in my personal development plan that by the end of the year after, I'd want all five. So that was kind of a personal objective. So we were busy later that year, so I couldn't carry on studying. So I kicked off study, I think about January this year as things quietened down a bit, and then thought,
Okay.
right, before the summers kicked in, I want to get all five. And then I made that conscious effort to get those.
Sure. So
Um,
you've done three this year.
Three this year, yeah, all within 5 weeks of each other.
That's very impressive. So which two did you start with? Did you have a kind of layout of which ones you thought would be easier to hardest, or most relevant for your job role? How did you decide on your which one you go first, basically on the order?
Yeah, so I chose a solutions architect because I'm doing architecture, so I thought that was most relevant to my job title. I don't think that's the easiest of the three associates. Um,
Which would you say is the easiest?
Actually, contrary to what I believed at the time, I think the developer is the easiest. Now,
Okay.
I maybe naively thought that was aimed at developers. I work in coding, in scripting, and turn my hand to coding. I wouldn't class myself as a developer, and I thought it was actually aimed at development folk. But actually, as you get into studying that exam, you find it's not necessarily aimed at development. You don't go into coding, you don't go into commands. It's understanding how the APIs within AWS are used and how they interact. And actually, there's a lot of knowledge you can gain from that just by not being a developer, just by being a solution architect or sysops. So there's a broad overlap, but I actually found that one easier.
Yeah, I'm glad you kind of gave a detail of the DevOps one there, because I do hear a lot of people getting worried about that exam. So I think they're on the same kind of pretense as you were, that you need to be a bit of a developer and coder to pass the exam. But from what you're just saying, it's not really necessary. It's kind of understanding the concepts behind it with the APIs, etc.
Absolutely, it's kind of a cross between the sysops and less so the solutions architect, but it certainly isn't developers. So I think if you're out there thinking that it's only aimed for developers, don't be afraid of this exam. It actually is, I found, the easiest. The only thing it's got in there to some detail is DynamoDB. So you need to know how DynamoDB reads and writes work. But actually, apart from that, if you've mastered that, and that would just take a bit of study, then that exam's not too bad. It's not too bad.
So with regards to an order for people that may not have any certifications at the minute, would you suggest kind of starting with what you think is the easiest, or that's more relevant to their role and job type?
Yeah, I think I would say role and job type. That's what I would say. I mean, I think if you're an architect and it's probably more logical that you go the architect route. Whereas if you're more a DevOps person, you may want to go the sysops straight developer route. I think you'll naturally might slide into understanding how that works. I mean, my background, obviously, as I said, was Unix administration, so I found the sysops one quite natural because it talks about commands and using a Unix administration knowledge. It comes up in that exam, ports and knowledge of those kind of things. So I think if you're an architect, I go solutions architect. If you're working in DevOps, I go developer or sysops. I would say if you're coming into AWS from outside, or you're brand new to IT and you want to start a career in cloud, I'd say probably go for developer first, and then solutions architect next, and maybe sysops last.
Is that purely for kind of ease and kind of getting yourself into how the exams work and familiarity?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. So we've covered which you think or you personally found the easiest. What about the hardest, and which one was most difficult to achieve, and why?
Yeah, very good. The most difficult for me was the solutions architect professional. The reason why, I think, just because of the amount of content it covers. Is very vast, and it covers nearly everything that's, well, the AWS class as core. I guess that's hard to categorize, but it will cover, all the storage, all the databases, EC2, your networking. What doesn't cover probably anything new that's come out in the last year or two. So it doesn't, at the moment, it doesn't cover any of their code deploy, code commit. It doesn't cover Lambda, it doesn't cover Docker or EC2 container set or container set.
Okay, so there's a few services you can kind of not worry about as much and not focus on.
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, I would expect them to change the exam content at any point. I would expect that, or them to bring out another exam covering the new content. But at the time I took it, it was mainly your traditional type services. But you have to know everyone and how they fit together. So yeah, I definitely found that the hardest.
So when you're studying for your exams, did you have any strategies in place, or kind of?
Yes, I do. I mean, the way I study is I like to go in and do a practice exam just to test my knowledge, my pre-study knowledge.
And is this the one that's on the AWS site, or these from other sites?
Yes, on the AWS site. So I purchased, well, there's two things. You can get sample questions. If you download the blueprint, you'll get about 5 or 6 questions in there. And by reading those, if you've got an idea of the answer, you'll know whether you're struggling or not, I think. But I purchased the practice exams, and I take that without doing any study. See
Are
how
they the ones that are $20? Are they still
That's right.
$20? Yeah.
Well, they are, apart from the Solutions Architect Pro, which is 40. So you don't make too many purchases of that.
No, but it might save you spending $300 if you're not quite there yet.
Well, absolutely, yeah. So I think, I tend to buy one before I do knowledge. I get my areas where I need to focus on. I go away.
So do you do that as your very first kind of stage, as your preparation, just to see where your working knowledge is before
Absolutely.
you begin your study?
I do. That's exactly what I do.
So then based on the results of that, you kind of know where to focus your time in your study, I presume.
Yes, I mean, the output of the exam, it actually gives you a breakdown of the domain. So anyone who's done the exams know they split it into a domain, which may be security, it may be deployment, whatnot. So you get a breakdown of your domains. So it gives you a good idea of what domains you need to focus on. If you're really hot on security but poor on deployment, then maybe you need to go up and read on deployment a lot more. I can base it on that breakdown and obviously my own feeling of how the questions went, and then go and focus on those areas.
And what sort of resources did you use to help you study, to focus on those areas where you needed to get a bit of knowledge gain?
So I mean, it varied between the exams, I must admit. For most of them, I used the AWS documentation. I opened a free account, and I played around. I used one of your training courses for the Solution Architect Pro, and also another one on the Cloud Guru. I use those.
Okay.
Just as pointers. I mean, if you do the pros, I've not seen a course you could sit and watch a course and pass the exam. But what the courses do is filter down the content and tell you, okay, this is what's going to come up. These are the areas you need to focus on. And that can save you a lot of time, actually, especially on the Solution Architect Pro, which tends to be so wide.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I do a mixture between the AWS documentation and if I'm weak in an area, I'll go and do a course and get the pointers and then go and study that. Open a free account as well on Amazon. If you haven't got a free account, you can get a 12-month free account. Go and do that and actually play. Get your read up what you're training on and actually sit and then do it. And that will really stick in your mind.
So how important would you say that practical hands-on experience is, like from that year's free account?
I'd say it really helps, actually. I mean, sometimes when you're reading stuff, you think you understand it, and then you'll get a question on it, and actually you realise that maybe you just memorised what they were saying without actually understanding what they're doing. For instance, when I was studying for the DevOps Pro, we don't use Beanstalk much, so I'm actually quite weak on Beanstalk. So I read all about Beanstalk and actually thought, well, some of the real detail stuff can be quite complex. So I opened a free account and actually did some Beanstalk deployments, got real understanding of the file structure, what you can do, what you can't do. And I think that practical knowledge is quite vital, actually. It could be
I think when you're using it hands-on, it sinks in a lot better. And when you do come across problems, it's down to you to kind of work it out, and you find out a bit more how the service works. That's certainly the way that what I learn. If I come across a problem, it's finding out how to resolve it and then knowing why that happened. I think that's where I learn a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So
Right.
having that hands-on is key, I think.
Yeah, and sometimes if things go completely okay, you don't learn as much because you just click buttons or follow the walkthrough. But actually, when it goes wrong and you have to troubleshoot it, that's actually when you learn.
Definitely.
So I'd say don't make your mistakes, and you'll learn from them.
Okay, so out of your 5 certifications, what has been the most satisfying for you, both personally and kind of important for your job as well, for what you do as an architect?
Yeah, again, I'd say the Solutions Architect Pro. Definitely the 2 pros, because the amount of study and the actual exam is quite grueling, that time restriction. So for those of you not aware, it's a 3-hour exam, and the questions are very long on both of them. So from a satisfaction point of view, when you click that screen and you get a pass, that's a real good feeling, because
It's a relief.
you don't want to go through that too often. It's really grueling. But also, getting the Solutions Architect Pro is at the moment probably the highest accolade in solutions architecture on Amazon. So, and I studied the most for that. I think definitely studied the most, and I was less sure of passing that.
So I don't think there's many worldwide at the minute.
Yeah, there's less DevOps Pros, because I think that's a lot newer exam. So I was just under 2,000. I think it's just over 2,000 solutions architects and just over 1,000 DevOps. But it's a much newer exam. You see it come out about a year later.
Do you know how many people there are that have all 5? Is there that stat available out there?
I'm not sure if it's a solid stat, but I've heard it's just crept up to over 100. But that's through hearsay. I couldn't categorise that.
Wow, and you're one of them. So congratulations. That's fantastic.
No, thank you. Appreciate it.
So how has your life changed with regards to the kind of role you do since you've kind of got all 5? Has it helped you progress within Hydrus and kind of push out further to wider customers and etc.? Has it helped you?
Yeah, I'd say more on a personal note than the business side. I think on a personal note, it's obviously gives you a bit of personal recognition, and your LinkedIn views shoot up, or mine have. So I get a lot of loads and loads of requests through LinkedIn, loads of recruitment requests, and doing things like this.
So it certainly opens doors for you.
Yeah, I think it's a lot at the moment. It's been a lot of publicity, and this kind of stuff is kind of publicity. So it's almost built more of my personal brand rather than the business side, I would say, at the moment.
Which can certainly lead on to further things within your business, I would imagine.
Absolutely. I mean, if I wanted to go and get a role in a company somewhere, I've had some headhunter emails and headhunter requests. So I think if you want career progression that way, if you look at a lot of AWS jobs at the moment, they're asking for these certifications. So I think the more you can show, the more chance you've got of landing one of those roles, definitely.
Now, I recently touched earlier on when I was introducing you at the beginning, saying that you're a co-founder of one of the AWS User Groups in Cambridge. How did that come about? So
I started joining the user group as a delegate actually back a year ago. In fact, this time last year. Actually, I live in Hertfordshire, so I attend the Cambridge user group and the one in London for AWS, as I'm bang in the middle of both of them.
For those who don't know, can you just explain what the AWS user groups are?
Yeah, so they are not affiliated to Amazon, but Amazon help endorse them and help set them up. So it's basically a user community that have an interest in AWS and meet regularly. Some do it twice a month, some do it every other month, some do it a bit more frequently. So it's a bunch of users that get together and we talk about AWS, and the format is generally 2 or 3 presentations. We have a surgery in Cambridge where you can come along and bring your AWS problems and people will try and sort them out. We have guest speakers. We sometimes have AWS speakers. So it's a community group, effectively.
Would you say these kind of groups are useful when you're doing your certification and just to gather more information when studying?
I think so. I mean, what I would say if you're studying for certification is absorb much AWS as possible, be it blogs, be it YouTube videos, be it white papers, and be it community groups such as the AWS User Groups. I mean, these things are, people give presentations on what they're doing with AWS. They show architectural patterns. We have different subjects every couple of months. So our next one in September is on big data. So we're talking about Redshift and things like that. These things come up in the exams. So people will talk about their experiences with these things, and we have, you have breakout sessions. You can come and you can ask questions, and there will always be someone there who can answer it. So yeah, I just say immerse yourself in the subject as much as you can.
And I guess it's always good to get the real world examples of these people's solutions as well, rather
Yeah,
than just your textbook how it works.
I think it's really interesting because people are doing really cool things with AWS, and the amount of variation that you see is quite astounding, and it is good to get the feedback on what people are doing and how they're doing it, because everyone does something different with the same tools.
So, so what's next for you? When you're one of 100 people globally that have achieved all five AWS certs. Are you going to look at a different vendor, maybe Azure, to try and get experience that way and go down the cert route there as well, or what's next?
That's a very interesting question, and one which I haven't decided yet, actually. And I've been thinking about that a lot. Do you stick to being AWS expert guru, or do you start going down other cloud
Multi-vendor.
routes? Yeah, multi-vendor routes, and I haven't decided yet. It's still to be decided.
Because I've noticed more and more kind of organizations using a multi-vendor approach to their
Yeah,
solutions. So I think it's worthwhile having an understanding of different cloud vendor technology.
yeah, I mean,
Um,
I see that in my professional life. I definitely think you're right. I think a lot of enterprises are definitely what I'm seeing are AWS and Azure. Definitely, I'm seeing that
why,
pretty much
why would you
everywhere.
say that is? Why would you say there's been a bit of a growth between multi-vendor? I mean, it's always been AWS being the leader and Microsoft a very close second. But like I said, I've seen a rise in multi-vendor solutions. Why would you say that's become a bit of an increased technology trend?
Yeah, I think to a certain extent, people or enterprises tend to have a bit of a fear of vendor lock-in to a certain extent. They don't necessarily like just going with one vendor. And I mean, obviously, that depends on the enterprise themselves, but that's what I tend to see. They like to split. They think about multi-sites and DR across multiple vendors, and how that can be achieved. So I'm definitely seeing a lot where I'm working at the moment, where people are, or enterprises are going Azure and going a split AWS and Azure space.
So if you did go multi-vendor, would you look at Azure? Would you look at Google?
I think
Um,
at the moment, I've not worked anywhere where an enterprise is looking at Google, so I'd probably focus on Azure. Definitely the next one if I was going to go. And I think most of the larger cloud consultancies tend to have a larger Azure practice. I think Google maybe starting to catch up, but I think Azure is still ahead.
and would you say between the vendors, because obviously they offer different services between, um, would you say they're very similar, or do they each have distinct advantages? Just from, I know you might not be proficient throughout all the vendors, being an AWS expert, but do you think they offer distinct advantages for different organizations?
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't know the other vendors that well, so it's hard for me to answer that without making a best guess effort. Um, I think
I wasn't sure how much you knew about the other vendors, so
Well, I know
that's
very
fine.
little about Google. I knew some about Azure, and some of the folks I work with prefer Azure because they tend to have Microsoft background, believe it or not. It's more of a company focus. So they've always been Microsoft. So Azure tends to be, if one of your vendors is Microsoft, it tends to be a logical step. I think that's one reason. Um, I do know people that prefer the Azure interface and the way things work, although it's not got as many features as AWS. What it has
Sure.
got works pretty well. And of course, some of them, some of it's around price. AWS is not always the cheapest. That's a dead cert. So some focus purely on if you're
There-
getting a
there-
VM.
There's a bit of a price war at the minute.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. That's right.
Okay, well, you've covered a lot of my questions there. I'd like to kind of open it out to the listeners, if that's all right, Stephen.
Sure.
So I'll have a look at some of the questions and put them across. So let's take a look. Um, Got someone here says, I'm new to cloud computing, but working on IT for a few years. Where should they start to become AWS proficient and be being competitive with some of the AWS certifications? It's the kind of best place to start from, really, when looking at AWS.
So the way I started is the AWS website. That's what I would say. I would start on the AWS website. The documentation on AWS, or more importantly, the white papers and the overviews and the FAQs, actually give a really good description of the services. So you can actually go and navigate around that website and get a really good idea of what AWS is all about. I would start there as your first point. If you then want to go down the certification route and you want to be more proficient, I would look at the online training vendors and pick a couple and go and do the courses, the associate courses. Maybe starting with the developer, if that's your background, or the architect if you're an architect, and just do the online courses. I mean, training's cheap nowadays. You can get a course for, not that much money, and then you can just go and do the courses, and they really do point you in the right direction.
Excellent, great, thank you. I'm going to keep the questions anonymous. Another one's just come in here saying they've cleared the AWS Solution Architect exam, but they're looking at doing the SysOps. What's the best advice that you can give for preparation? Any online recommendations, reading materials, and kind of approaches to different study methods?
Yeah, so first, congratulations on the Solutions Architect. So I guess just repeating what I've said previously, I think I'd say your course on the SysOps Pro and also the Cloud Guru ones would be great starts. They're both good courses. They give you a lot of knowledge and actually point you in the right direction. In terms of study, the SysOps one is read the blueprint. So I'd start with the blueprint. There's a list of white papers in that blueprint. Read through all those white papers and read the sample questions that you can download from the AWS certification website. Once you've done those questions, maybe you've done a course, you'll get a good feel of what your strengths and weaknesses are, and then go and study those areas. That's what I would advise.
Yeah, there's a few questions coming in about that kind of where to start off, where their background has been in different areas, and AWS is kind of scaring them off and just looking for pointers on where to start. But I think you've kind of covered that area nicely now.
Yeah, definitely. The certification page on the AWS website, for each exam, there's a blueprint. Now, don't worry too much about what it's saying you need to know, because you can actually study that. So don't be put off if you go to a blueprint and it says you must have this, you must have that, and you haven't got it, because I don't think you necessarily must have that. You can study for it. I'm putting some of my folks that hired us through the exam at the moment who come from outside of IT and are starting new careers, and they're getting through these exams without any background. So I'd say don't be put off.
I've noticed on some of the blueprints as well, it says you must have working knowledge of this protocol and that protocol, and
yes,
I think that's a little misleading,
yes,
because you don't really. There might be kind of one question on it, but it's not kind of how the protocol works or deep level understanding.
That's right.
It's very high level. So those blueprints can be a little off-putting at times. But like you say, it's not a deep knowledge of those areas where it says you must have.
I think it helps. It can help. It's obviously not going to hinder. It's not going to hinder, but don't read the blueprint and then be put off. But what I was going to say about the blueprint is that they always give you some white papers to read. Now those are very useful actually, and some of those white papers are really, really good. So sit and take the time to read through the white papers. And then another really good source is reInvent videos. So if you go to the last reInvent, so Amazon's got a YouTube channel. Go to the YouTube channel and it has a category for reInvent. That's their global conference for anyone who's not familiar with reInvent. So if you were going to study for the exams now, go and look up for reInvent 2015, which is the last one, and then you'll see all the videos split off by category. I think you've got security, architecture, deployment, and there are tons and tons of videos. So if you're traveling to work on the train, or if you've got a spare half hour at night, just watch a video. You really will absorb the information. And even if you don't understand it all, actually watching it, you'll realize that you are absorbing something, and it's almost a subconscious thing. So those are really good starters.
Excellent, that's great. I've got another question coming here. So they've got a couple of AWS Associate level certifications, and they've got 3+ years experience with VMware-based cloud. But some employers are now asking for real-world AWS experience. What would you advise on what strategy they should take to get hired by AWS partners or providers to get that real-world experience?
Yeah, it's very good. So I guess the way I started to get real-world experience is to, I mean, if you can't do it for your day-to-day job, do it on the side of your job. You know, start small. I used to just play in the evenings. Set yourself a target. Say, okay, I'm going to build this 3-tier web infrastructure or whatever you want in AWS, and I'm going to do it. And then spend, you know, some of your free time in the evening or weekends doing it. Document it as though you were doing it for an employee. Build up this knowledge, because this is what you're going to be doing when you go and get hired by a vendor. You'll be looking at building infrastructure or designing infrastructure, depending on what job you do. If you're a solution architect, you're going to be around designing and putting things together. If you're going to be doing DevOps, or you actually want to be hands-on in the background, you might be building these things. Create CloudFormation templates. Build it through automation. So I'd say, you know, start small, doing it on the side. If you can't do it for a real customer, do it for a pretend customer, because you're still getting the same knowledge.
Yeah, that's a great idea. That's a great idea. And another aspect that I done as well after my certification was to go onto a lot of the forums out there. AWS do an official forum where people post up real world issues and problems they have, and kind of anyone can go along and suggest ideas and solutions. You see a lot of different applications being used there, and it's great to use your knowledge to help others and to answer those questions. It really keeps your mind kind of focused on AWS and the services. If you can't use it every day in your real world job, then kind of look at other avenues out there. Like I say, you've got the official AWS forum. I use Experts Exchange a lot as well, where people are posting cloud issues and questions out there, and if you can answer them, then that's great. You're developing your own knowledge at the same time as well.
Yeah, I would also add on top of that, because that was a great thing to say, Stuart, is that things like the user groups as well. We come solve people's problems. So you might not have a problem, but you could make one. You know, tell them that you're learning. This is what you want to do. How do you do it? And during hackathons, you know, some of the user groups have hackathons, and we're actually thinking of putting one on where we'll get all our delegates and say, here's a use case. You know, we might do it for a charity or something. They need to build a new website out of AWS. They want it all DevOps managed in the background. It all got to be automated. Get in groups of 5. Spend 24 hours. You've got 24 hours. Do your best. What can you come up with? And, you know, those are a great way to learn. And if you go to, you can be fortunate enough to go to reInvent, they do hackathons, and you can just go and get involved in these things.
Yeah, I think reInvent this year is towards the end of November, is it? Beginning December?
Yes, it is. Yeah, it's. I think.
Are you going this year?
I am. I booked.
Do you have a special pass? You've got 5.
I wish. I wish.
Put up on a throne somewhere.
Yeah. I wish, yeah.
Okay, we've got some more. Got some more questions coming in here. How important is it to have some AWS certifications if they have to migrate their company to the cloud, and from what regard as well? So would you say it's essential?
No, I don't think I wouldn't say certifications are essential to anything, right? Because I've worked with a lot of people in my life that have never been certified because they just don't like doing exams, but they're brilliant at what they do. So is it essential? No, I would say not. But it depends on what I do think is essential is that you've got a good knowledge, and whether that's through certification or whether that's through self-learning. I think having good knowledge of moving something to the cloud, especially if it's AWS cloud, of course, but actually having knowledge of AWS is really, really going to help you.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's fairly easy to set up things in AWS, but getting it architected correctly is another matter, especially when it comes to issues such as security. I mean, kind of anyone can set up something within the cloud, but having it done correctly is another matter.
That's right. I think it's a very good do-it-yourself platform, but do-it-yourself means also you can very much get it wrong. Um, and I guess it's a bit like DIY at home. You can do stuff, but have you done it well? Well, that's really where the proof's in the pudding. Some things fall apart because they haven't been done well. Some things get hacked because they've been left wide open. So I think having that knowledge of what you're doing certainly helps, even though it might not necessarily stop you getting something done.
Okay, I'm just kind of reading through some other questions coming in here. Got a lot of questions for you today, Stephen.
Good to have you. That's a good thing.
Okay, someone's preparing for the Architect Associate. Which are the specific areas that they need to concentrate on, as AWS is too vast? Should they read the user guide and developer guide, or just reading through the FAQs are enough?
So I wouldn't go through the user guides because there's a lot of user guides to read. There really is. You need that content condensed down. What I'd say again, start with a blueprint, read the white papers. That will give you the direction, and do one of the courses, the online courses. Those are the way. If you're coming from this fresh, that's what I'd start with. So start with a blueprint. You'll get an idea of what the content is going to contain, and then go and do one of the courses online, because these guys have worked with people who've taken the exams. They've spoken to all the people who have taken exams, and they've condensed that content down. So
yeah, I think you're right. The user guide and the developer guides are quite extensive documents, and you just don't need it at that level for a lot of the certs. The FAQs are quite good to get what you can and can't do, the kind of limitations of the services, and I've found them quite useful at times, but I certainly wouldn't read through the entire user guide.
Yeah, I use the user guides as a reference. So
Yeah.
if there's something you're weak on, go and read that part of the user guide. Just read a couple of pages, but don't try and read it start to end, because you just won't take any of it in, and they're so long. You'll get bored, and you just won't want to do it.
So I've got a question coming here that kind of picks up on something we were speaking about earlier with regards to which certification to go for first. Someone's a SQL, SQL DBA. They're asking which exam would be most suitable for them.
Yeah, so I'd say actually probably the level of DBAing you're doing in your day-to-day role is probably not going to be covered in the exams, because they don't go into necessarily SQL or even really into the database types in any level of detail. You'll need to know, for instance, what RDS does in the solutions architect, and the types of databases that are supported in RDS. But you won't ever go into the actual database itself. So from that point of view, I would say, I mean, probably being a DBA administrator, you're probably closer to the sysops or the developer rather than the architect. I think if you want to stay in DBAing rather than moving into the architecture, I'd probably say go for the developer and then the sysops, and then the solutions architect last.
Okay, brilliant. Got someone here who said that they found the salaries that they found online for even the associate certifications are all six-figure salaries. They said they've got no IT experience, they've got an unrelated degree, and they just don't know what kind of job prospects they could get after achieving the solutions architect and the DevOps. They're both excited and scared to start this path.
So I'd say don't be scared. I mean, because I've got someone coming through Hydus who's doing exactly the same thing. Absolutely exactly the same. Complete career change. And there are plenty of junior cloud architects out there. And if you look at some of the big cloud consultancies, they're taking on juniors all the time. And although the jobs generally specify that you must be a grad in IT, I think if you've got the equivalent, i.e. AWS exams, they're entertaining you as well. So I say use it as an opportunity. Don't be scared. If you go and do the exams, because you can do the associates most definitely, and try and get a job and practice.
And to a degree as well, it can be a little bit helpful not having that traditional way of working within the IT, because it is so different. Whereas a lot of people struggle with some of the concepts of how it's traditionally done to the cloud. If you haven't really got that experience or knowledge, then some concepts can be a little bit easier to grasp, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I've been working, I think this is my 16th, 17th year in IT, and I'd say throughout that time, now, or the last few years have probably been, from my point of view, the best time to get in IT, because it's what's going on out there with cloud is a revolution. IT is almost starting, to a certain extent from scratch, and I think you can actually come in from scratch with cloud and build up a really good working knowledge, better than any point I've seen before in the past.
Yeah, certainly. Got an interesting question here, actually. It says they've been preparing to take the solutions architect associate, but they're always set back after a few days of not studying. Is there a way of getting a grip of this? So that happens to me, actually. I tend to block out some time, do some study, and then life gets in the way. Family commitments and work commitments, and then you think, right, where was I? And you find yourself kind of going over a lot of the same stuff you had before because you're just not in that mindset anymore. Have you got any kind of hints and tips on how to get around that?
Yeah, I would. I mean, obviously, you can't create more time for yourself, so you have to fit in what you can. What I would say is try and do a little bit every day, even if that's a struggle. So, for instance, what I was doing is I go to the gym quite a lot. So when I was going on the exercise bike, one thing I would do, I'd sit with my headphones, instead of listening to music, I'd actually go and watch a YouTube video on AWS for 10, 20 minutes. So, I mean, it looks sad, you're looking at a video while you're doing exercise, but actually I was multitasking, right? You can do these two things at once. Like I said, when you're on the train in the morning and you're sitting waiting to go to work, instead of reading the paper or having a sleep, watch an AWS video or read just a chapter or read a white paper. I'd say it's better to try and do a little bit often than try and cram in less in one go. Obviously it depends the way you adapt to study, but for me, I think little and often sticks in the mind, and you tend to forget things less often if you're doing it every day.
No, some great tips there, thank you. Okay, so a little bit, there's one slightly different from the certs here, which would be nice for you. So they're very excited at the possibilities for IoT. Do you see this being huge? If not, what features do you think will be the largest facet of future growth in AWS and why?
So I think if I was to make a bet, I think IoT and Lambda are going to be the biggest areas, or serverless, I should say, growth areas. That's what I would say. Absolutely.
Yeah, serverless is certainly taken off a lot at the minute. I hear a lot of people talking about it. I see a lot of blogs about it. I see a lot of stuff about it on LinkedIn and other social media.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. The questions come up because my co-founder of the Cambridge User Group is actually an IoT expert. So I see the projects he's working on all the time.
Okay.
And so it's good to see that feedback. And it's a massive growth area, and there's some really cool things happening with IoT at the moment. I think that area is only going to get bigger. I think another area where we're going to see growth is probably in voice-enabled apps. So Alexa and the Echo.
Yeah.
Not over in the UK yet officially, but that the interest in that's really taking off. And I'm curious to see how that's going to progress with voice-enabled applications and voice-enabled devices. So
Yeah, that'll be interesting as well.
I think we've got some really exciting times ahead, which is again why I say it's a really good time to get into the computing at the moment.
Okay, there's a question here that it's kind of position you're in as well at the minute, Stephen. What are some of the ways to build and grow your business as a cloud consultant using your AWS certifications?
Yeah, it's very, very interesting. So, I mean, I think obviously you need to get out there and have some IP, so, intellectual property. So if you can build something that's repeatable and then offer that as a service that people can buy, I think that's where I tend to see most of the vendors making progress. So they'll build maybe, I don't know, a container service that uses Docker, and then they sell that to their customers. Rather than always building stuff from scratch, I'm seeing that as a big growth area. So that's one thing we're focusing on at the moment. And of course, the other area, if you want to go as an independent consultant, is to get into enterprise. So enterprises are moving definitely onto the cloud now. So you can go in, and my experience is that you can go into an enterprise and really make a big difference. So yeah, I'd say those two are areas to focus on.
Excellent, thank you. We have a question here. How big is the jump from architect associate to architect professional? And is there kind of any tips when kind of progressing between the two certifications?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to quantify, but I say big. It's a big gap. It's a big jump. I think to put it into words, these associates, I think you can do from book knowledge. You can sit and read the white papers, the FAQs, the videos, and if you study hard enough, you'll get through those. I think the professional is not. The professional, you really do need to know your stuff because the questions are a lot more challenging. They're a lot more detailed. The exam depth is high, and actually the exam itself, it's not just a one sentence question with 4 answers. They're actually scenario based questions, so you can be reading a page of A4 text just before you get to the answers. So it's challenging from so many different points of view. You need to know your depth, but you need to be able to answer quickly. I think the exams there are almost a test of how quickly you can answer rather than your knowledge. So you do need to practice with these exams. I'm not saying that anyone who was bright and who's got a great memory couldn't do it just from reading, but I say having a working knowledge for most people with AWS is probably almost essential there.
I think that kind of answers the next question as well. Someone's preparing for the DevOps Pro exam, and they're kind of reaching 60% levels of it, but the last 20-40% they're finding very tough. The time pressure with the exam and the final material is hard to kind of grasp. If there's any advice to kind of how to get through this last hurdle.
Yeah, so I've written a blog on my website for both of these professional exams, so good tip to go and read that on my Hydra site. But just to reiterate, yeah, to get to 60 to 80, I think it's the devil's in the detail. So the DevOps Pro actually doesn't focus, is not as wide-reaching as the SysOps Pro, but what it does do into great detail. So you're going to be looking at CloudFormation, auto-scaling, A/B deployments, CloudTrail, CloudWatch. I think that's about it, but you need to know those in a lot of detail. So what I did is I got 65% on my first practice exam for the DevOps Pro. And then I went and read through the user guides for everything I didn't understand. So I went and looked at CloudFormation and looked at, wait handles, made sure I understood them, make sure you understand how auto-scaling works with CloudFormation. Really need to nail down where is it you're going wrong, what bits aren't you getting right, and then go and study those using the user guides. So that's how I did use the user guides when I wasn't getting stuff right. And then just study and practice. That's all you can do for that exam, I think.
I mean, if you was to fail any of these exams, should you be put off or just focus on the different domains that you need to improve on and kind of get straight back into it? Because I know some people who have failed and just thought, it's not for me, and they leave it a period and they forget everything they learned, rather than kind of getting back on it straight away.
Yeah, so I'd say I know a lot of people who've actually got the 5 that failed once or twice, especially on the SysOps Pro. So I'd say don't let that deter you. And actually, you know, every cloud has a silver lining. Put it down to experience. The more you sit and do these 3-hour exams and answer these questions, actually the easier it becomes. And one thing I've said in my blog is that I recommend doing, if you can, do the exams close together, the DevOps and the SysOps, the Solutions Architect, or even if you fail, do one close if you can get the study in, because actually that practice of sitting through those conditions becomes easier, believe it or not. You get used to the fact that you've got to sit there concentrating for 3 hours. You get used to the fact that you've got to answer these questions quickly, and you've only got less than 2 minutes to answer each question. So that goes in your head, and the more you do it, the easier it becomes. So I'd say don't be deterred.
And there's probably a small overlap between the exams as well, so having that study close together will help.
I'd say on all the exams, the associates, you'll find some questions are overlap between all 3 of them. So you might find one question is actually in all 3 of them. And the pro ones, not exactly, but there is definitely an overlap in the content you need to revise. So if you've done one of the exams, you'll probably find you don't have to study as much for the other one because you've covered some of the content already. So yeah, if you can fit the study
which is always helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. If you can fit the study in, do them as close together as you can, definitely.
Okay, I think we've got time just for another 1 or 2 questions. Many employers are seriously looking for engineers with cloud migration experience. What material or courses are available that you've seen to gain this experience? Is there any materials that you've come across out there that help with cloud migration?
No, I mean, migration's a large... Yeah, there is material. I say it's, again, most of the material I've used has been YouTube videos from reInvent and practice. It really depends on what you're migrating. I mean, there's so many things that are migrating to the cloud. Are we talking a big ERP application? Are we talking a database? Because AWS has got its database migration tool now, of course. Are you talking a web application that's coming from, web hosting into AWS? There's a lot you can migrate into the cloud. So I think you really need to look at the use case, what you're migrating, rather than migration in general. And then what I tend to do is go and research it, go and look for videos on the YouTube website, on the AWS channel. And then if you can, if it's something you can practice with, get some practice in.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Okay, I think we'll close the questions there just because of time. There are some other questions that have come in that we'll post on our Academy community. So if you go to cloudacademy.com, you'll see a community section there. We'll post those questions in and get those answers back to you guys. So I just want to say thank you, Stephen, for your time today. It's been great having you on here to be able to talk to you about the AWS certifications. I certainly got something out of it, and I hope our listeners did too. And congratulations again on achieving all 5.
No, pleasure. Thank you, Stuart.
Yeah, I look forward to trying to achieve that level myself.
Yeah, good luck. Good luck.
Thank you. So just as I close, those of you out there want to view any other webinars from Cloud Academy, the first link on the screen there will give you a list of upcoming webinars and other webinars that we've already held, and you can watch those back. For any enterprises out there or companies who want to train a team of people, then the middle link there, the Enterprise Cloud Training, that will offer a live demo of our enterprise products. And for anyone out there, just an individual who's just trying to gain additional knowledge of the cloud, then that last link there will give you access to a free trial offer for Cloud Academy and our courses, etc. So thank you again for listening, and thank you again, Stephen, for your time today. It's been great.
Pleasure.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. Bye
Bye.
now.